Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and I love math. Math.
And I'm Scott Daly, and math is stupid and dumb. Language is where it's at.
Metaphors are just lies.
Your face is a lie. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope you are all having a wonderful, wonderful Friday evening. I'm sure we know a lot of you guys in the... It's not an audience. It's a digital audience. But if you are joining us here for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media. We just introduced... I was about to say our names, and I realized we did that already. And we make podcasts about the stories we love, and we also do this monthly book club. Matt, why don't you explain this stuff?
All right. Well, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, and we let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it. At least that's how it usually goes, because every 6 months, we seize control of this democratic process, and we decide what we're reading. This month, it was your turn, Scott.
That's right. I picked the book, and then we all meet up today on the last Friday of the month and chat about it. We will pull slides of important or interesting moments and really just spend a couple hours diving deep into these books. For those of you in the chat right now, feel free to make comments, ask questions. This is not supposed to be like a lecture or one of our typical podcasts. We want this to be an interactive thing, so feel free. I see already in the chat we have David, we have Matthias, who says they're going to be bouncing out pretty early because they got the... Matthias, you got the date wrong. You gotta look at that calendar, Matthias. And of course we have Tringard. How's it going, everyone? And if you're in the chat, say hey.
Yeah. We really want you to interact with us. We get a lot of really good feedback from the chat usually. We really rely on you guys because this is really hard.
Yeah, it is. I don't want to have to think of what to say. We need you guys to tell us what this book means. Speaking of, while we're waiting for people to say hello, Matt, why don't you tell us about this month's book? This book I picked. What is this book I picked?
This month you selected Seanan McGuire. We looked this up. Seanan McGuire's
get there eventually.
Middlegame. And the summary as follows from Goodreads. Meet Roger. Skilled with words, languages come easy to him. He instinctively understands how the world works through the power of story. Meet Dodger, his twin. Numbers are her world, her obsession, her everything. All she understands, she does so through the power of math. Roger and Dodger aren't exactly human, though they don't realize it. They aren't exactly gods either. Not entirely. Not yet. Meet Reed, skilled in the alchemical arts like his progenitor before him. Reed created Dodger and her brother. He's not their father, not quite, but he has a plan to raise the twins to the highest power, to ascend with them and claim their authority as his own. Godhood is attainable. Pray it isn't attained.
It's ominous as fuck.
It's a pretty ominous way of framing the story, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a fairly creepy story. I liked this picture I found, which is technically not from Middlegame, but it was a hand with candles coming out of the fingers, and I thought that was awesome. So I'm assuming the Hand of Glory is like a thing that exists outside of this book. I don't know.
Yeah, some kind of magic concept that I've just never heard of before for some reason.
Yeah. So we got Josh in the chat. We got 567 and Eric. How's it going, guys? All right. So you guys, while we're giving our overall impressions of the book, we want to hear your overall impressions. Had you read this before? Did you read it along with us? Or do you just pop in here having read the book a long time ago? I think it's a fairly new book. So while you're doing that, Matt, why don't you tell me, what did you think of Middlegame?
Yeah, so, compliment sandwich. There was a lot of really great stuff. I loved everything relating to Roger and Dodger's relationship, and I suppose what you might call the middle part of the book regarding their childhood and adolescence together, or together and apart, and together and apart. That was by far the best part of the book to me. It was the most moving part. It worked on me incredibly well. On the other end of the spectrum, pretty much everything with Reed, I would have just cut out entirely. I don't know if it was the audiobook reader and kind of the ridiculous melodrama of the way she chose to portray both Reed and his cronies, but I did not really enjoy that part of the book at all, and I I thought it actually brought down the rest of the book. But basically there was so much good like characterization and dialogue, and I love these two main characters so much that I think that made up for it. So that's my take. What did you think, Scott?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, first of all, we need to say that Amber Benson is the person who did the audiobook, aka Tara from Buffy, and therefore it is definitely not her fault at all. So it must be the writing. It cannot be her fault.
Okay.
So that must be it. I'm very much in agreement with you here. I love Roger and Dodger as characters. I loved especially the early childhood to the teenage years versions of Roger and Dodger as they were kind of dealing with life and relating to each other in this weird way, and both like being geniuses of their own right and dealing with the struggles that presents to their lives. I love them. They're great. And you're right. Every single chapter that had them in it, I was really into it. And then the alchemy stuff just creeps into the book, and I just don't care. I really don't. Like, I don't care about Reed. I don't care about Lee or Lay. I don't know how.
Yeah, it's Lee. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Yeah, it was Lee.
Yeah.
And what's weird is that the book really starts with all that alchemy stuff.
Right. It's like the first 50 pages, and I was just like, I was like, crap, what have I done? Because I picked this.
And then it ends with it too, and by that point, you're just like, yeah, they've won.
Right.
It's fine.
Right.
There's no more tension here.
Well, and the goal of our arch villain, who is extremely flat and not interesting at all to me, is very up in the air, even until the end. Like, he's gonna get all the god power.
And I mean, the book also never explains. This is more of a nitpick. This is one of those things where we've talked about this a million times. I'm only even nitpicking this because other things didn't work for me. But I don't understand why he didn't just keep them in cages for their entire lives.
Because they had to be human. Because that was important.
I think he did a bad job.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of his character, is his overconfidence and his being convinced of his brilliance was part of his downfall. But yeah, I don't. We're getting a lot of comments here. Eric says they didn't like the book. Sammy says first of the book had me confused. Loved once Roger and Dodger showed up. Completely agree. I was confused throughout a lot of the book. I swear to God, I talked to you about this the other day. I swear to God, there's like, I was convinced at several times I had missed like a chapter, or like this is a sequel to something that I admit, like, because they're talking about stuff in this book, specifically the Up and Under, the book series by the main alchemist. They're talking about alchemy and generally in a manner in which the book seems to be assuming that you know what they're talking about. And I never felt like, not only did I not know what they're talking about, I never felt like, even once I learned it, I was just like, oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think we compared it to The Magicians in that it has like a made up Narnia-like thing that it's
sure, but it doesn't really do anything with it. Like, it really like there's a recurring thing throughout the story is at the end of chapters they do little excerpts from this book that's supposed to be like the hidden code of alchemy in it, and it just I got it. Like, there's two characters, they're supposed to be Roger and Dodger kind of, but it never connected to me, and we're kind of spoiling a lot of the conversations we're going to have here. But yeah, I mean, I think overall there's three characters I really loved, and they're the three most important characters in the book, and that's what got me through it. But every time we moved away from those three characters, I just had a rough time.
Yeah, I agree. It looks like Josh and Tringard also agree. Like, the Roger Dodger stuff is very strong. The Reed stuff is quite weak. Yeah, that's the sentiment that we are seeing. And you know, Eric points out there's so much more you can do with language and math as concepts. Somebody points out, sorry, I saw it and then my eyes skipped off of it. Just the idea that like, for a book that's nominally kind of a magic wizard book, that they don't really explore the powers very much, and it leaves you with kind of a, you know, the Sanderson's laws idea that you kind of need to understand the powers in order to know very simply, in order to use magic to solve a conflict, you have to understand how the magic works. And I don't know. I sure didn't understand the magic. So
I didn't mind that much because it's just like the concepts are so abstract, right? It's like language and math, and that's like in the language of the book, that's everything. Between
right,
those two, that's everything.
yeah. Well, to spoil the ending, when he starts telling when she's shooting at him and he tells her to miss, instead of thinking that was awesome, I was like, why don't you just tell her to die?
Well, he's not that
There's
powerful yet, Matt.
so many better options than that. Anyway,
All right, let's just jump into it, and we can really dive into these complaints we have as we go through the book.
cool. All right. So I guess I will start us off with this bit. The book opens at the end, part 7, 5 minutes too late, 30 seconds from the end of the world. There is so much blood. Roger didn't know there was this much blood in the human body. It seems impossible, ridiculous, a profligate waste of something that should be precious and rare, and, most importantly, contained. This blood belongs inside the body where it began, and yet here it is, and everything is going so wrong. Dodger isn't dead yet, despite the blood, despite everything. Her chest rises and falls in tiny hitches, barely visible to the eye. Each breath is a clear struggle, but she keeps fighting for the next one. She's still breathing. She's still bleeding. She's not going to bleed for long. She doesn't, no pun intended, have it in her. And when she stops breathing, so does he. If Dodger were awake, she'd happily tell him exactly how much of her blood is on the floor. She'd look at the mess around them, she'd calculate the surface area and volume of the liquid as easily as taking a breath, and she'd turn it into a concrete number, something accurate to the quarter ounce. She'd think she was being comforting, even if the number she came up with meant, I'm leaving you. Even if it meant, there is no coming back from this. Even if it meant goodbye. Maybe it would be comforting to her. The math would be true, and that's all she's ever asked from the world. He knows the words that apply to this situation: exsanguination, hypervolemia, hemorrhage. But they don't reassure him the way the numbers reassure her. They never have. Numbers are simple, obedient things, as long as you understand the rules they live by. Words are trickier. They twist and bite and require too much attention. He has to think to change the world. His sister just does it.
So this is our opening, and I want to talk to you about like the general structural element, which is we kind of start in media res and then kind of do 18 years or 30 years earlier type of thing. And I think actually that is something I don't like in books or in stories generally. Like I hate a lot of TV shows do this, right? Where they start like midway through the action and then jump back and like the character is about to die and then like 24 hours earlier type thing. And it seems like that's what this is doing, but we kind of learn as we go through the book that actually this is related to time loops. So we're really just starting at the end and then working our way through the story, and then it happens again and again.
Yeah, I think the only element of this that I thought worked was that for the whole book, you think that Dodger's going to be in this exact situation and probably die.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's pretty late in the game that they introduce the idea that they're in time loops where they're changing things every time. And then they preserve the drama of that by having her still get shot, but in a way that's like minutely different than this time. So she's actually able to survive it. And it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. I don't know. It's always a risk to like I don't care about Dodger yet, right?
Sure.
Now after having read the book, I love Dodger. Super worried about her. Don't want her to die. At this point, it's a little bit of a risk to introduce a character and be like, oh, by the way, this character is going to die. It puts a little bit of an obstacle between you and between the character and the reader. I think that said, I think I still liked her a lot. So
it does, but I think one of the clever things this whole structural element does is we return to this scene again and again. So I knew nothing about Roger and Dodger at this point in the book. They're meaningless characters. I'm like, oh, one of them's dying, and then we got it wrong is what transitions us to the next part of the book. But then we come back to the scene again later in the book, and now we kind of have an understanding of who Roger and Dodger is, and we care a little bit more. And I think we come back to the scene 3 times, maybe only 2 times, before we live through it in the ongoing timeline with them. And so like the first time you have no emotional connection to it. The second time you have more, and then by the time you're there with it, you know what's going to happen. And I think it adds to the tension in the ongoing timeline where like she's going to get shot. I know she's going to get shot. That's going to happen. And I don't know. I think it enhanced. It made that scene more interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think ultimately it worked. Although I think maybe I didn't think it was a good idea for most of the book. By the end, I think I changed my mind on it.
Sure.
So.
One thing I also just want to mention, as critical as I'm being of this book, and I think we're going to have a lot of things to say throughout it, I generally think the prose is well written. Like just here, this opening, I thought this was engaging. Like it's well paced and well written. I don't know. It worked on me a lot. Especially there's recurring beats around the language. Like this captures the thing that Roger does again and again throughout the thing, where he like lists 3 words that apply to the situation. I really liked that recurring beat. I don't know. I think it's a well written book. It's just the story and some of the characters didn't grab me.
Yeah, I mean the so I listened to the audiobook as always, and I felt like it was well written from the point of view of just sounding nice. Like some books don't sound beautiful when read aloud. This one often did. And I think this beginning sounds nice when read aloud, especially like it's got a kind of, she's still breathing, she's still bleeding, like the kind of repetition and patterns and things like that.
Well, and there at the end, words are trickier. They twist and bite and require too much attention. I love that. Like it's just like attaching characteristics to these abstract things. Numbers are simple, obedient things. Words are tricky. They twist and bite. I like that a lot.
Yeah, there's some really beautiful turns of phrase in the book. I hope we get to talk about some.
Tringard says it reminds them of Rothfuss's style, and I could see that. Yeah, I wouldn't have put that together until you had said that, but now that you said that, I'm like, yeah, I could see that. I think Rothfuss is probably a little bit better, with no shade to this author, but
yeah, I think so.
Right.
Cool, yeah.
Anything else you wanted to say about this?
Nope.
All right. So let's talk about Over the Woodward Wall. In the same ordinary town, on the same ordinary street, lived 2 ordinary children who had never quite managed to cross paths. This, too, was sadly ordinary, for the line that divided the students who went to school on the west side of town from the students who went to school on the east side of town ran right down the middle of their block, an invisible barrier that had split them in 2 before they were old enough to notice. Every morning they got out of bed, put on their clothes, kissed their parents goodbye, and walked off down their ordinary street, through their ordinary town, in 2 ordinary opposite directions. The 2 children were very much alike and very different at the same time, as children so often are. One was named Hephzibah because her parents had a languid and eccentric way of looking at the world. They called her Zib, understanding that Hephzibah was a name that she was more name than she had shadow. Every day they watched for signs that she was growing into her name, and every day they were disappointed. Soon, they promised each other. Soon. The other was named Avery, because his parents had a sharp and efficient way of looking at the world. They called him Avery when they were happy, and Avery Alexander Gray when they were mad, and gave him no nicknames. Nicknames were for people whose names didn't fit them properly, and they had measured him, every inch, before they named him. We did well, they reassured each other. We did. These are our 2 children, ordinary, average, wildly unique as all children are. Our story begins on an ordinary, average day. A day which had never happened before, and would never, in all the length and breadth of time, happen again. So this is one of many excerpts from Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker, who we will learn is our god alchemist who created Reed, who created Dodger and Roger, and all the way down the line. I wanted to use this slide, and I think we have one more slide that acknowledges the Up and Under book series later when I think Aaron reveals. But I wanted to use this to talk about this because, first of all, I think this doesn't work at all. Here's the problem with it, in my opinion. Obviously, you're supposed to connect these 2 children to Roger and Dodger, right? And I think actually, reading over it now, it's kind of reversed, right? The girl, Zib, seems to fit closer to Roger. Avery seems to fit closer to Dodger, I think. But go ahead.
I mean, I think you're right, but it's not clear enough for me to be sure, which I also see as a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I think the problem with this, I think it's a fun idea, like this idea of like, well, we're gonna have this thing, and it's gonna follow at the end of some of our chapters, and it's like telling the story of the story, kind of, and it kind of relates to. I think one of the things that Seanan wanted to do with this book is kind of talk about storytelling. It's like a story about storytelling.
Mhm.
But one of the problems with it is it's so few and far between that by the time you're on another section of Over the Woodward Wall, you don't remember what the last one you read was. So much has happened between that. I knew the thing I got from this the first time I read it was 2 kids, 1 Zib, 1 Avery, and then I didn't get anything else as we went. And so like it reminds me of what Sanderson did in Mistborn, except what Sanderson did in Mistborn was kind of expertly tie the little blurbs at the top of each chapter into the overall narrative in a very straightforward, obvious way, right? Where you're reading this thing at the top of the chapter and it means nothing to you at the time, but then in the book he reads it back to you at one point, or one of the characters actually reading the thing that's been at the beginning of the chapter, and then you're like, oh, I get it, this has been this thing all along and I get what it's doing now. This book doesn't ever do that, so it's just always kind of out of reach. I never really feel like I had a grasp on what the importance of the story was, why we were being shown it, why it ended up mattering to the overall story, outside of just literally the exposition of, well, she wrote this thing to kind of secretly tell the story of alchemy throughout the ages, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I was totally expecting there to be the moment where, like, I mean, okay, the way I would do this, right, is you have at least one of the kids be super into these books, and they actually know the books, and they've read them, and they've memorized them, and they think about them, and they talk about them. Yes, I'm ripping off the magicians, but this idea is also sort of ripping off the magicians.
Sure.
And then at a crucial point in the story, it becomes relevant. Like, it actually becomes like, oh, I get it. The way we're going to escape from this situation is by doing what Zib and Avery did in their story, or some clever poetic analog to that, or some metaphor. And it could be the moment where they're able to explain, like, oh, it's a metaphor. This is what metaphor is about. This is why metaphor is powerful, is you can communicate in ways that are not straightforward. And no, there's no point where like you could literally just like give somebody this book as a gift and have cut out all of the Over the Woodward Wall segments, and they would miss nothing.
Yeah.
So,
and it's frustrating though, because there are characters that consistently talk about them, right? Like Aaron uses phrases from these book series, and I got enough to understand that the improbable road and the impossible city, and I think she calls him some random name of some character from this book that I like.
Jackdaw.
Yeah, Jackdaw, and everyone's talking, and that's where I really wondered in the back of my head. I was like, am I just a stupid idiot? And these are like actual children's books that like this novel is assuming I've read before. And no, of course not. It's all made up, and it's like it just felt like everyone in this. There was no character in the story who didn't know the Up and Under books, and so like served as the audience surrogate to be explained to them, right? Like even when we get the explanation of them, it's like, well, you know those books? Yeah, those books. Well, this is what it was for. It's like, okay, but what happened to Zib and Avery? Like, what?
Yeah. Well, it could. I mean, so yeah, and maybe I was just wrong. Like maybe I was reading wrong by having this anticipation that, Asphodel has written these books as a kind of instruction manual, so that the next generation of cuckoos is going to use them to defeat Reed. Like that was my assumption. That's not really how it works. It's more like the explanation is like, oh, she wrote the books so that the psychic power of all children would make the universe cohere to her vision of reality, which is kind of interesting, I guess. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Sure. But it doesn't really go anywhere plot wise or character wise or really connect to anything else.
It strikes me as like, and I don't want to make assumptions, so I'm putting a clarification before I do this that I have no idea, but it strikes me as like an author has an idea, right? It's like, yeah, and I'm going to tie it into this children's book, and it turns out this children's book, and then when they actually sat down to do the writing, it never really like weaved its way into the story, but it was left there anyway. and it kind of has a coda at the end there where it ties into it, and then like with the, as Eric is saying in the chat, it ties back to Frank Baum, and Wizard of Oz is actually supposed to be like the counter narrative that they use to melt Lee, which I thought that was a fun moment, but
yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think it worked. I just don't think it worked, and it was confusing, and it's not even just these sections. Like it's how characters talk about them. Erin, who is a character, by the end of the story, I ended up loving Erin. I really do. I think she's like my favorite character in the story. But throughout most of the early parts of the book, she's just, whenever she's like revealing something, she's just speaking nonsense, and
Yeah.
I'm just incredibly frustrated, like so frustrated. I was like, I've got to be missing something, and I kept like I read it on Kindle, and I kept like going to the table of contents and seeing like, did I miss a thing where they explained this? And like, I don't need everything explained to me, but it was one of those things, like sometimes you can feel when you're not supposed to know something, but the book doesn't want you to know it. And sometimes you feel where like you just feel like you missed something. And this was the latter for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say something that's maybe kind of mean, but I feel like this book needed to be put in a drawer for a while, and then she should have come back to it and done some heavy edits and rewrites and rethought some things, because a lot of stuff like this, it just feels like I kind of think even the author knows that this doesn't work. I mean, I must be wrong because it's in the book, but like like not only do you and I agree, like this is one of the only times that like every single person in the chat is like the reason I'm not reading what the chat is saying right now is that everyone's just agreeing with us and
yeah,
and just like you know, pretty much everybody in the chat's just like yep exactly. Didn't get used, kind of confusing. Expected to see it used. It wasn't needed to be tied into the story. I'm just kind of paraphrasing comments from 567, Eric, Sammy, Tringard, Josh.
Sure.
So yeah. Well, okay. Shall we move on from Over the Woodward Wall?
Yeah, and I think we might have some better things to say. Maybe not on this slide, but maybe the next one. We're almost through our first 50 pages of gobbledygook.
So here we meet Reed, creation of a baker who is continuing her work and attempt to embody the doctrine of ethos to take over the world.
I guess.
Our first attempt to embody the doctrine was a success, he says, before mutters can become outright revolt. We forced a guiding principle on the universe into human flesh. There have been complications, yes, but the theory remains sound. Complications. A boy with so much of reality resonating in his head that he can't be bothered to interact with anything beyond what he sees behind his closed eyes. The child has never spoken. He stopped eating 3 years ago, and while he still lives, sustained by clever machinery and feeding tubes, he hasn't opened his eyes in 18 months. The doctrine is imprisoned within his shivering skin. There's no way to extract it, to make the world dance to their whim, save for giving it to a new home and putting its old one in the ground. The difficulty of the doctrine is its size. When placed inside a mind, there's no room for humanity. We believe that by splitting the doctrine into its component parts, mathematics and language, we can create a gestalt of sorts. Two people who will embody the concepts we're attempting to harness, but whose abilities will be limited enough when separated that they will remain pliable and easy to control. How pliable? Asks an investor. Pliable enough. We've arranged for an upbringing that will both encourage their endangered humanity to flourish and teach them that pleasing us is paramount. Once they're reunited, they'll do whatever we ask if they want to stay together, and they will. Their natures will leave them no choice, and we'll have them. We'll control their access to everything, including each other. What sweet torment it will be for them, these cuckoo children of the doctrine, to be denied their other halves while he deems them worthy of reunion. Unworthy of reunion, I guess. They won't be ordinary children. That is denied them, and gloriously so. But they'll change everything.
I don't get it.
So I was channeling the audiobook reader there, by the way.
Good.
Yeah, this is the conceit, right? This is the thing that we should just be able to be like, okay, this is the premise.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're like the statement that you don't get it is I kind of still don't get it.
Well, like I understand what the doctrine of ethos is, right? Like
Kind of.
that's it's a Greek term that relates to music, which they say in the book, right? They say in the book this relates to how you can use music to kind of pass along information. I get that. I don't get how you extend that idea to like shrinking the power of the universe down into children. Like it was just like bippity boppity boo. That power's in these kids now, and that's basically that's just how what you have to do with your brain, right? You just have to square it at that, and it's like I don't understand it. I don't understand how it works. I don't understand why it works. But the book is telling me they were able to do this, and they're able to do it quite easily because they do it like with several sets of kids, and they do it outside of just ethos as well. They do it with chaos and order is one of the ones we know about. So they do it with other kind of abstract concepts of the universe. But I don't get it.
I mean, like honestly, I leaned on my intuitions, gleaned from a certain web serial that uses urban magic, or urban fantasy, I guess you'd call it, where the conceit is basically that magic follows the tropes of storytelling, which seems to work here because they were able to, like, she was able to change how magic worked by changing how children thought magic worked through a children's book.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like one of those things where you're like, if you believe hard enough that you can split the forces of creation and time and space into human vessels, then you can do that somehow.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did kind of like about the story is how like bloody it is. I mean, more specifically, like how brutal Reed is. Like it's very, there's so many, there's this attitude of just like treating children like a commodity that he's using to, you know, dissect to build these vessels.
I mean, one of the things I really enjoy is just how disgusting and awful alchemy is.
Yeah.
As just a practice. Like everything they do requires something terrible. Like baby fat.
Right.
It's awful. It's terrible. And it's just nothing to them. It's just science. Like they've linked it with science so much that it's just part of the scientific method and they don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Josh says, my understanding from looking it up is that the doctrine of ethos had a bunch of different scales which would induce certain behaviors in people. I assume each person they made was a different scale. Yeah, I get that. I get that conceptually, like, right? Like the concept of, okay, there's this idea that says we can influence people via musical scales, and I've taken that concept and said we can influence we can trap concepts. Like, I can't even explain it. Like, I can't even finish the sentence, Matt. It's just, you just have to, like, I think you just need to, and I'm okay with doing this. I don't need everything explained for me. I'm okay with just going, okay, well, this is what they did. But in the moment, the reading of it, when I was here at this point in the story, I was like, oh, God.
Yeah, I guess I thought we were eventually going to see how they had actually done it, and maybe there was going to be some kind of terrible revelation, maybe not, but they don't, and that's okay. It wasn't like I was specifically let down by that, but I was thinking like, oh, I think this is being set up where we're gonna find out how they were made exactly, and it's gonna be something horrifying and disturbing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know you. You said you liked like how deliciously evil Reed is, and I think you're right. I just think that's all he is, though, and there's like there's nothing. I mean, I guess you could argue. She sets up time. She sets up like time to kind of show that he's like this warped product of the person who made him, and that's interesting, I guess. But it never goes anywhere to me.
Yeah, well, I never quite bought him as like a character. He was just bad guy, and so was Lee. I mean, Lee likewise is a little bit delightful due to just being so evil, like scenery chewingly evil, and it's kind of fun, but there's a limit, right? There's an upper limit to it where like you don't even hate her enough to be happy when she's dead because she's not quite a person to you.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there were hints at like who Lee was gonna be, like as a reveal. Like, because Reed didn't make her. He found her. She
Right.
was, like, made from corpses of scientists. And do we know... did we ever learn who made her? It seemed like they
No.
were setting that up to be significant, and then it...
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I just missed it. I don't know.
I don't know.
Let's move on. Let's move on to the parts of the books that are good. Because
Okay.
I'm tired of being negative. I don't like
Sounds
being
good.
negative.
Let's do it.
Let's meet Roger and Dodger. So we finally go back and get to meet our characters we saw dying at the very first part of the book. The 9-year-old Roger and Dodger, who, despite living on opposite sides of the country, suddenly find they can talk to each other and see through each other's head. Roger can't take it anymore. "Who are you?" he asks. "Is this a trick?" "No, silly. This is math. Math is never a trick. Math never plays tricks. Sometimes it makes problems, but they always have solutions, not like stupid English." The girl's voice turns to frustration. "Frogs don't wear clothes and drive cars, and if you get sucked up by a tornado, you wind up dead, not in someone else's country, and a road can't be improbable. It's all a big dumb lie for big dummy liars, but they still make us learn it. It's not fair." Here is something Roger understands. "It's not a lie," he says, triumphant. "It's a metaphor." He pronounces the word with a long E, like meat-a-for. Neither of them notices. In later years, when mispronunciation has become one of his greatest fears, he'll look back on this moment and grimace, wondering how they could ever have become friends when he started their relationship with a mangled word. It's using thing that's not true to talk about things that are. If something's not true, it's a lie. Not always. He doesn't have the vocabulary to explain why this is so. He just knows it is. That some things are symbols for ideas bigger than they could ever be without help. That sometimes untruths are the truest things of all. "I still don't know who you are." "Dodger Cheswich." Her voice turns prim, and he recognizes that tone because he's heard it from his own lips. It's the voice of the smartest kid in school being asked a senseless question. "We rhyme. Roger and Dodger." So we meet. Here they are.
Yay.
And they're adorable, and I love them.
I love them. Let's just talk about them for the rest of the time.
Okay.
Because they're great.
They are.
They're each great in a totally different way, and their relationship with each other is great. I know, I think I've said before that sibling stuff is my kryptonite, so I was especially vulnerable to that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the thematic stuff that really connected to me in this book has to do with those sibling relationships. I want to kind of build a broad metaphor here of Roger and Dodger kind of like pinging off each other as like how in your life your relationship with your siblings goes, right? You're friends with each other when you're young, and then you get a little older and you piss each other off. And like me and my sister, when we were little, we were friends. Then she became a teenager, and then she hated me for a long, long time. And then it wasn't until we were in our 20s and now that we really have become good friends and family again. And so I related a lot to how they kind of keep pinging off each other. And of course, in this book, it is literally because of outside influences gaslighting them multiple times. But I don't know. I found a lot of connection to that idea.
Yeah, right. And sometimes the reasons why they, are forced to split up are because of just some tragic mistake.
Yeah.
And even in those cases, it's super sad. Like, it's just a very effective mechanism of creating drama, is having these people you just want to be happy and be together, and they mean so much to each other, and then you just keep taking them apart from each other.
Yeah.
And also, I like that it wasn't romantic. It's sibling, right? That's
right.
Like it's so. I mean, there's plenty of stories about romantic relationships, right? Like it's this pure and extremely powerful sibling love and affection and desire for completion with the other person, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, I love the way in which they meet here, right? Like, so the scene is that Roger is attempting to do math homework and he hates it and doesn't like it. And then suddenly there's a voice in his head that's telling him how to solve the problems. And that's how they meet. And it allows you to like immediately see, what their strengths are and then how those strengths relate to their character. And I love how we expand upon that and explore that more going through it. Like, we're going to talk about the difference, like his social skills versus her isolation, her, quick movements versus him, like much more slow, lethargic stuff. I loved how to take, like, one of my favorite things about this book is just take the concept of, okay, math and language and people that are really good at this and build a character around what you think those concepts would be like if they were personified.
Uh,
And I thought that was really cool.
yeah, me too. Absolutely. I mean, even down to apparently silly details like color blindness and depth perception and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. Well, and
Cool.
I mean, what was your thought on that actually? Because like, I guess the idea that the person who like, I guess it has to do with the fact that they're missing essential parts, right?
Yeah.
Um, like, and I think it relates to the fact that like with the order and chaos ones, the one who is the embodiment of order only sees chaos in the world. The one that is the embodiment of chaos only sees order. And it's kind of like she sees math and calculations, but can't like perceive it properly.
Yeah. I mean, it's debatable whether that was done to her on purpose to be like, if she could perceive the world perfectly in addition to having her math superpowers, then she would just be too powerful. And so they made sure that they denied her that.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I mean,
I,
like clearly there's not a symmetry between them. Like she requires him to tell her what to do, right?
right, right.
Stuff like that where it's not just like a perfect like, oh yeah, they're just the perfect manifestation of their attribute. It's
Yeah,
more complicated.
they are missing. They are missing
Yeah.
essential parts, and they need each other. And I don't want like I don't like the idea that they did it on purpose. I like it better as just this is what happens when you try to split up these two essentially universally entangled items. Like you lose something in that process, and that's what
Yeah, I
I
like
liked
that.
it as. And it makes them need each other on.
Well, I don't think it's ever actually implied that they did it on purpose, so I think I'll
Yeah,
just go with what you said. Yeah, I,
yeah.
I I like it better that way anyway.
Yeah, Sammy says I loved when Roger just thought California was more colorful. Yeah, that was a great little bit where he's so young he doesn't even really comprehend what color blindness is. That's one of those moments where the book is like you, the reader, get to be like, oh, he's colorblind. That's a cool little beat.
Yeah, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
All right, next section.
Hmm.
Okay, so Roger and Dodger are getting along too well, so Reed sends out Lee to split them up. She does this by gaslighting the fuck out of Dodger.
Roger, did I write Dodger?
Roger, no, you wrote, yeah, Roger. Roger, we received a no. Who is this?
This is Lee
This is Lee.
pretending to be
Okay.
doctor whatever.
Roger, we received a very worrisome phone call. Your school nurse says you've been talking to yourself. Not playing pretend, all children do that, but really talking to yourself, like you were carrying on a conversation with someone who wasn't there. Do you want to tell me about it? Terror crashes down on him, hot and fast and utterly consuming. He doesn't want to be taken away, has never known this was something that could happen. He's happy here with his family and his things in his familiar little world. If he lies, she'll be able to prove it. Someone at school must have seen him talking to Dodger. A lie paints this woman as in the right and puts his family in danger. The less appealing option is the only one that remains. I wasn't talking to myself, he says, and sees his father relax just a little, enough to make him sure he's doing the right thing. He focuses on Dr. Barrow and says triumphantly, I was talking to my friend Dodger. She lives in California and we communicate via quantum entanglement. That's why I can talk to her inside my head when she can talk inside mine. His mother gasps and buries her face against his father's shoulder. Dr. Barrow's expression becomes one of understanding and, more worryingly, pity. Oh, Roger, sweetie, she says. I wish you'd said something sooner. I wish you'd told someone about this delusion. The adults in your life have only ever wanted to take care of you. Please, moans his mother, raising her head. Please, we didn't know. He didn't show any signs. Please, we'll get him the help he needs. We'll make sure this stops. Just don't take our little boy away from us, please.
I hate it.
Yeah. Also, his parents turn out to be complete monsters anyway.
Yeah, so I assume this entire scene is performance, right? This is all performance to make him, to kind of scare him into like being convinced that this was all made up. Like
Yes.
I don't know, maybe his parents like have grown to love him over the course of having him, and they really are worried he'll be taken away. But his parents are working for the same people, so I read this as just total performance. Like, please don't take him away. Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I remain unsure, which I see as a flaw, actually.
I don't know if it's a flaw.
Well, I guess like, I I feel like I feel like I would know I feel like it would be dramatically more impactful if I knew whether they actually cared about him or not. Because like in the timeline where they catch him and they're gonna go up to his room and he has to reset the timeline,
Mm-hmm.
they have like a conversation that you can't actually hear, and it's like, so are they talking strategy or are they arguing about whether they actually have to do this or
I
like,
think they're talking straight. I mean, I actually pulled a slide related to that, so I think we're going to see them reacting in a very specific way that's weird. So,
okay, all right, we'll save that then.
yeah.
567 says their read is that Roger's parents still love him, but they're more afraid of Lee and Reed.
Yeah, that could be. I guess I'm more pessimistic about these terror. Like, I assume all alchemists are terrible, except for Erin. She's the only one that's good, and even
Yeah.
she's still terrible till the very end.
Yeah, she's terrible. She has her justifications and she has her sad backstory, which makes us a bit more sympathetic.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is when I realized that the book had started to work on me, because like it's obviously we the reader can see through this, and I think this is one thing McGuire does very well, is like when they're young children, the whole playing with the fact that we can understand things quicker than they can, and so we know exactly what this is. Like obviously we know the story, we know that they're real, so we know he's being gaslit, and it's just really frustrating. And that's when I was like, oh, these characters are working on me, like because I don't want him to buy into this. I'm like, Roger, no, don't do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's so sad. Is this the first time they're forced to split up? I think it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So basically he just buys into the fact that she's made up, and they don't see each other again till the chess tournament, and then they're split up again after she tries to kill herself, which I think is the next slide. So
Okay.
we can get right into that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, like, generally this the especially the first half of the book or so is just built with these beats of like coming together, being pushed apart, coming together, being pushed apart, and it's like I think it builds up to this nice sense of like this sense of inevitability that like every time they attempt to separate them permanently, they find a way back together no matter what. And I liked the like that, like it's the inevitability, like kind of a crashing wave. It's just gonna keep coming back. It's just gonna keep coming back.
Right. The world distorts to make it happen. Like,
right.
Like, why would he be at that particular chess tournament? Well, the universe wills it.
Yeah. So years later, Dodger is a teenager, and despite successfully reconnecting with Roger, life has kind of beaten her down, and this is when she's decided to commit suicide. Dodger is so very unbearably tired. She wouldn't describe what she feels quite like that, but deep down, she knows tired is the right word. Maybe the only word. She's tired. She's tired of being too smart to slow down and appreciate things that aren't performing at her level. She's tired of the adults treating her like a circus sideshow and other kids treating her like a freak. They're not the same, not quite. To the adults, she's the strong man, the fire eater, the girl who dances on the trapeze without a net. To the kid, she's a bearded woman, the lobster girl. The adults gape and whisper because of what she can do. The kids her own age do it because of what she is. They're both right, and they're both wrong, and she's exhausted from the effort of trying to make them understand. She's tired of being lonely, and having Roger back in her life has only made things worse when it should have made them better, because she always thought he was the same as she was. But he's not. He's not. He has friends, he has people, he has a life, and she has numbers, and figures, and math enough to redefine the sky. The numbers would have been enough if she'd never found the door at the back of her own mind, leading to a boy of her own age, to the day, who couldn't finish his worksheet. They might even have been enough if he'd never slammed and locked the doors between them, shutting her out and giving him time to change the world he lived in. She could have adjusted to how much better he was at people than she was if she'd watched it happen, if he'd boiled her like a frog. But he didn't do that. He closed her out. And while she was gone, he raised the temperature of the water, and now that she's back, she can't take it. The flaw, she knows, is hers. The weakness is hers. That's okay. She's the math girl. She's the one who appreciates the necessity of the inevitable equation. She can see where these numbers go. So I pulled this. I find this incredibly well written. This is a beautiful and tragic passage, like the echoing beat of how tired she is, and the tragedy of this feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, and how like it really starts to influence how different these two characters are, and really pick at the differences between the guy blessed with language to basically make him like be able to deal with people. And like language, like in this book's definition of language, it is like everything that's not numbers. So language is understanding social stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I agree. It's beautifully written. The whole part with her suicide and Dodger or Roger trying to save her from that, and her father reacting to it. It was all heart wrenching and beautiful. And I think that was the point at which I was like, oh wow, this is really well executed. These characters are really well drawn. This is just kind of very, very tastefully done too, I thought.
Yeah.
And just overall, my favorite part of the book probably, in terms of being effective.
I agree. I mean, like, look at I love that she creates metaphor, which is hilarious. Given the 2 slides ago, we just talked about how she hated metaphor, but she builds this beautiful metaphor about the circus sideshow and how adults and kids see her differently. It's both the same and it's both difficult, but it's different in distinct ways. I love that. I mean, that to me, it seems like to me like Roger and Dodger are 2 very well drawn characters, and they're great. I feel like our author relates to Dodger more than she relates to Roger. And I feel like parts like this show it. Like, I feel like this is our author writing about a feeling that she has felt before. I mean, and that might be presumptuous. I don't know, but it felt like that to me.
I think that, well, yeah, I mean, that's interesting because Roger clearly doesn't have to struggle as much. And in fact, his life is easy and kind of just goes the way he wants it to go and the way he expects it to go. I think, the main way that he may be similar to the author is that the author is an author, meaning she's someone who loves words.
Sure.
But I think that it does seem that a lot of the struggle and suffering is captured in the Dodger side of the equation. So
yeah. Well, and I think you're right that the part of her that she sees in Roger is the love of words. But I also think, and again, I'm putting a lot on this author who I know absolutely nothing about, but I like the idea of her relating to Dodger more because she loves words, but struggle. Like, I feel like authors struggle with words a lot, right? Like, they love like the idea of writing is trying to struggle to find the words to express something. And that is something that Roger can almost instinctively do. He always seems to know the words, whereas Dodger struggles with that constantly because it's not her thing. And that to me, that feels more writerly to me than person who just is like, who loves words and is just like, yes, here's the perfect words for the situation. I have them right here. It's no problem. It's like none of the empty page problem,
Yeah. I mean, we didn't really talk a ton about this idea of splitting the world into words and math. It's pretty unusual, actually, right? Like, I don't know if I've ever seen that particular dichotomy of saying like language versus math. It's like, well, yeah, those are the 2 subjects in school, but
sure.
Carving up the universe that way, it's interesting because it's basically saying, like, on the one hand, there is reality as it is. There's space, time, position, velocity, etc. Everything that goes into physics and mathematics is as it is and is immutable and is perfect and can't be made any simpler than it already is. But then we humans have this whole structure of language where you can describe some particular fixed thing in an infinite number of different ways, all of which are correct. And in fact, as subjective beings, we actually construct our own reality in our own minds using our own concepts. We don't actually have access to that perfect world of math that is described by mathematics. So I think this is actually a pretty cool dichotomy. It actually, once I understood it, I thought it worked really well.
I agree, and I think it really fits how they are inextricably linked, because that perfect world of math can't do anything without the language to construct its purpose, right? And I think that's why Dodger needs Roger to give the command. Like she has all the math, she has the equation, she knows how to calculate everything to do exactly what it wants, but she needs the story, she needs the language to frame it, and that's his role.
Yeah.
And it also makes sense why she is completely unable to really interact with people, because that is his domain entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, it's tragic and it's awful, and I really like this part of the book. I really do. I thought it was beautiful. And Josh is saying it really caught them by surprise, and they really liked it, and it really fit someone ruled by math. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Josh also mentions that I think it's a conversation that was happening before. Like, were they meeting up and up again because of just fate, or was it because of timeline manipulation? And my answer to that is yes. Right. That's what I think it is. I think it is a combination of the two. I think these seem to be two forces that are so drawn together that they will create the ability to pop in each other's brains, even though they're across the country, but also they are consistently manipulating the timeline. Like, I think at the end we learn 13,000 times they've done this.
Yeah, I ended up with a sense, actually, and tell me if you agree, that Asphodel had architected this entire thing, and basically Reed was always doomed, and it was always fated that he would fail, and that maybe not these particular cuckoo children, but some pair of cuckoo children would turn out to be, to manifest the doctrine and to win, and to do it independently of Reed, so that they would be able to remake the world in, a good way, which presumably is what's supposed to happen after the book ends. Like, basically they eventually are going to become gods and remake the world in a way that isn't ugly or whatever.
Yeah.
What that means exactly is left open, of course.
Yeah. I like that interpretation. I'm not sure if it meant that to do that, but I like that so much that I wish it had made that more explicit. And I think one of the ways you could have done that is by using this device of the Up and Under that you've created, these books. Like, you can make that very obvious. Trinkard is saying it tells us that early on. I don't remember that, so I agree that maybe it should have reiterated at the end. But if you make the conclusion of the story she wrote specific to what is happening with these two characters more, then I think that draws that parallel specifically, and
yeah,
I think that would have been better for it.
I agree. Okay.
All right.
Moving on. Okay, so years later, Roger and Dodger reconnect in grad school at Berkeley. Everything is going great, but when Roger heads home for Thanksgiving, things get weird. "You need to call Dodger right now," says Aaron. There's no greeting, no pause to find out who she's talking to. She knows who's on the other end of the line, and she doesn't have time for pleasantries. She never has. "You need to say the following. Take us back to the last fixed point. Tell her it is an order. Tell her it is an abjuration. Tell her it is a command. And do it fast, Jackdaw, because the whole damn impossible city is about to fall on your head." "Aaron, what are you doing with Dodger's phone?" "Does she know you're calling me?" "No, I don't have time to explain it to you, and I'm not going to have time because you're about to wipe the last week off the board. This is a bad equation, dumbass. This is a sonnet that doesn't rhyme. Take whatever metaphor you need, but call her and end this fast." "Roger?" His father sounds angry, canceling out his mother's sweetness. "Get down here this instant." Roger crouches forward, cups his hands around the phone, like that would make any difference in the world. "Look, Aaron, I want you to give Dodger her phone back and cut this shit out right now, or so help me." "You found something." He stops dead. "I don't know what it was, because I'm not that attuned to you. But it was something that shouldn't exist. A story you wrote about having a sister, maybe, or a photo, or a drawing. You found something that didn't happen in this timeline, hidden with the things that did happen. That's because we've been here before. Not exactly here, not this precise point, but close enough for government work. We've done this often enough for me to start remembering, and you need to call Dodger, and you need to repeat what I told you to say right now." Or what? Or this might turn out to be the last timeline.
So we're really starting to get into the timeline portion of the book, right? This is, I think, the first time where the book makes it very explicit that they're kind of popping back and forth in time. And this is Erin really now comes into her role of exposition fairy, which she will be for the rest of the book, where she explains things to our two characters who are extremely dense and take forever to really like get it, which I thought was kind of realistic in a certain way. Like they're geniuses, but they're geniuses in very specific things. So like they also don't know they're in a book. So if someone just starts talking to you about this stuff, you're gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
What? Stop it.
Right. I mean, the fact that they have a telepathic connection that she knows about somehow would make you think that they would be willing to grant her some benefit of the doubt.
Nah, man, that's normal.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because when this time travel element was introduced, I was like, oh no, this is a terrible idea. And then pretty quickly I was like cool with it actually.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to me because I was like, okay, you cannot introduce a time travel gimmick at this point in a book that has had this tone up till now, but she makes it work actually. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about it is we don't see it actually used that often, but
Yeah.
its effect is everywhere. Like I love that from this point on throughout the book, we're like getting little bits and pieces of the hints towards the big reveal at the end, that it's been 13,000 times, that like they've been multiple places more than once, they've done these things more than times. We have Erin like feeling the I forget, like the air gets kind of thick, and like there's all these little bits, like, and that the one thing, there is one thing that I don't like about it. Later in the book, when we really start getting near to the end, suddenly Roger is talking about how his whole life he felt like he was living deja vu. And I don't think they set that up early in the book.
Yeah, that's never mentioned before that point.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe the argument is the scenes we were seeing in that point were the first times, whereas the later scenes are like after. Like, I don't know, but I feel like that would have been something and maybe I just missed it. Maybe it's like cleverly put in there. I just don't remember it, and I think it would be interesting to kind of cleverly lay those seeds in a way that you don't notice you're being set up for something, but then it pays off wonderfully once you start doing these timeline things.
Yeah, I admit I get confused about the idea that there could even have been like a drawing that shouldn't be there in his secret hidey hole, because it's like, did you reset the timeline or not? Like, or how is time supposed to work if you reset something but then you find something that shouldn't be in this timeline? Like, how did it get here? This is one of those nitpicks where if overall the story was working for me, I probably wouldn't ask, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just felt like what they're doing is not perfect, and they don't really understand a lot of it yet. So there's like mess ups and mistakes, and like presumably Roger can create whatever he wants. So if he wants to like, because he basically controls who remembers what, right? Because we learned that he has specifically told Erin to remember specific things, and because he ordered it, she does it. So he just order piece of paper with picture on it to exist in this timeline still.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. No, I think that actually might be right. Like, this is all organized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in the chat, sorry, things are moving so fast that I'm actually losing track of the things that I wanted to talk about. Good. Yeah. But 567 says they like the twist that the main characters can't actually remember. Yeah, I thought that was cool. Airrex says they get annoyed by them never remembering, so there's a little bit of back and forth there. Yeah, I think I like because we've read lots of time travel stories, you know, or seen time travel movies where the characters are trying to navigate some kind of time loop and they know what's going on. But I actually kind of like this idea that this isn't really that kind of book where it's about like the intricate details of how they're doing these time loops. We're clearly not privy to 99.9% of what's actually going on. We're just kind of following this one thread, which is, I suppose you could say what we're following is mostly the last timeline, the victory timeline.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we're seeing the results of a ton of stuff that we didn't actually see directly. And so it's fun when you get little hints like through Aaron or through other things as to what could have happened in these other timelines.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and Tringard said this is really the only time we don't get to see the successful path, which is actually like, I understand this has to happen to explain the concept of rebooting to people, right? Like, but it is weird that like in this one, this is the winning timeline one, but here's this little bit in it where they just oopsied for a sec. Like, I mean, because technically, if the structure is our characters are going through, they've done this 13,000 times before, and this is it. They're going through the one that they get it right in. There should have been no oopsies at all.
Right.
But I guess this was like not a full oopsie, but like a mini oopsie.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think that doesn't bother me too much. Like, the first, like you said, the very first chapter, the very first page is introducing us to this idea, although we don't realize it.
Sure.
And then this is the revealing, oh, that's the mechanism that's in play here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember. There's no other time when they have to reset the timeline, though, right?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
I mean, outside of when we jump back to book 7, right? And see the end. But I'm not like, I don't even know where those fall into the timeline, right? Like, are we on a certain path and then we jump ahead to it failing and then it jumps back and then we catch up back to where this new attempt was? Like, are we seeing the part we were reading get to its end and then loop back or not? I don't know. Or are we just seeing different moments at which they reach the end and reset? I don't know. And I don't think it matters, right? I really don't think it matters, but just fun things to think about.
Yeah. 567 is asking a question that I have as well, which is that the audiobook will give a timestamp. Does the normal book have timestamps?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess if you wanted to, you could keep extremely careful track of where exactly you were in the timeline and possibly answer that question you just asked.
Yeah, I mean, it does that, but it also is like, 5 years later that day. So maybe I wasn't paying it. Maybe the actual timeline, maybe the dates do weird stuff,
loop back or something.
But yeah, I don't think you're at all primed to be paying that enough attention.
Certainly not in an audio format. If somebody just reads out a date and time to you, that just goes right through your brain and onto the floor. So
Sammy says he was hoping we'd do that. Sorry, Sammy. You'll have to find the math version of me that cares about doing that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I bet there's someone online that took the time to do that.
Yeah.
All right. So this is where we really start to talk about Aaron here, who we just talked about a little bit, but this is where Aaron gets gross. Aaron is Dodger's roommate and also a secret spy for Reed, and she has been ordered to take out their friend Smita, who, through a blood test, is really close to discovering that these two are not quite human. And it's awful. To make a hand of glory, you need the hand of someone who's been murdered, says the woman, says Aaron. Lots of people seem like they've been murdered, but the alchemy is specific. It doesn't work nearly as well with a victim of manslaughter, for example. The intent is embedded in the flesh. Murder-suicide is also a complicating factor. Someone who wanted to die creates an inferior light. You need a genuine victim of intentional and intended murder. The more brutal, the better. Violence also seems to embed itself in the flesh. It's funny. The homeopathic ingredients required to violate the laws of nature. Smita's lips draw back from her teeth in an involuntary expression of disgust. That's horrible. Why would you even say such a thing? I didn't just say it. I killed this man. He was a guitar player. You might remember him. Used to sit down by Amoeba Records playing bad acoustic covers of pop songs. I said I'd cook him dinner, and then I took him apart. I'm not much of an alchemist, but I'm an excellent killer. Erin sets her burning hand primly on the edge of the nearest table. The flame doesn't so much as flicker. It doesn't matter that I'm not good at alchemy, because this is one of the simpler recipes. If you're willing to commit murder, that is. And if you're willing to work with the rest of the ingredients required. Some people get a little squirrely when you ask them to play with rendered baby fat. I know there's been research dedicated to updating the recipe, but they haven't found anything yet. Sadly, some things are just inescapable. Smita finally gives in to instinct and takes a step backward. Erin stops, cocks her head, and smiles. There's sorrow in her expression, like she doesn't want to be here, saying these things, doing whatever it is that she's come to do. Smita finds she doesn't care. Dimly, with horror, she realizes her surprise and anger have transmuted into fear. So this is awful.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked at this part actually, because it's like, oh, but I like Aaron and I like Smita, or however you say it,
I don't know.
and she's gonna kill her, and like you kind of know she's going to from the beginning. It's really sad. It's actually kind of surprising to me that Aaron is able to kind of get back into your good graces by the end of the book.
Yeah. I love her. I think she's a great character. I mean, I think she's a great character when she's just like this terrible person. I think her story is really interesting. I think like the book almost ends on like her part in the story. It's like the book's about to end and then it's like, oh no, wait, here's this her last part, the last bit of order taking its stand.
Right. She kind of redeems herself a few times, I guess you could say, by, well, I don't know. See, that's the thing. I don't know if she ever really fully redeems herself, but you learn, I guess a better way of saying it is that you learn that the reason why she's going through these things is ultimately, okay, let me ask another question about something I'm unclear on, actually.
Sure.
Does she always have this plan that she's going to go against Reed, and everything she's doing is trying to get Roger and Dodger to manifest and not be under Reed's thumb? Or at this point in the story, is she still just totally working for Reed, and she isn't like is it during the time that she's living with Roger that she decides that she's going to help them, or is she always helping them?
Her main impetus for helping them is the death of her brother.
Yeah.
And so I mean the like it's weird because it's a lot of time shenanigans, because she's so closely linked with them that she's been told many things and knows a lot more than anyone else does, just by like she's lived. If they've looped 13,000 times and Aaron has been told to remember stuff amongst these 13,000 times, we get the idea that she's been alive a long relative time, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think the answer is yeah, she's both required to do her duty, but is also like just playing her role, waiting for the beats that always happen to play out, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and as Josh saying, she mentions there were several times where she spared Smita, but ends up causing things to be worse. So she she seems cold and evil, and I'm not saying she's not, but it's like once you've lived something, like it's the Groundhog Day thing, right? Like once you've lived something so many times, like they stop being people at some point. Like if you've killed this person 13,000 times, I know it's not that full number, but
you tried other things, and
right? Like
you're almost just like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen this time,
right? And I think that's why here, I think it's clever because here she comes off so blasé about it, like the way she's explaining how the Hand of Glory works, that like it seems like she's taking pleasure in it to a certain extent. Like it can't just be manslaughter, it can't be murder suicide, it has to be intentional, violent murder, and it's it's funny, the homeopathic ingredients required to violate the laws of nature. She's so casual and blasé about it, and before you really understand the full scope of the timeline looping stuff, it just comes off as simple, just malevolence, and it is, I think, a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, before we move on from here, I don't know if there are any slides that address this specifically, but there's so much of this part of the book that's really just about Berkeley. Having lived there for a while, like all of the places they go to, all of the place names that they refer to, all the buildings they go to are places where I've been or walked by, living in Berkeley for a while, and I'd be pretty surprised if this author never lived in Berkeley, because there's so many details about particular record stores and particular buildings and such.
Let's look it up. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, and no other part of the book really has that level of detail about like the particular pizza place that they get their pizza at,
Mhm.
which every Berkeleyite knows that place. So
She was born in California, so.
yeah, I bet she went to school there or something
Mhm.
because she knows Berkeley super well.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I forgot that you lived there for a while. I knew
Yeah,
that, but I had forgotten it. Thanks
yeah,
for ordering me to remember it.
yes. Remember that for the next cycle.
All right.
It's an abjuration.
Alchemy's gross, right? Rendered
Yeah,
baby fat.
I mean, I love grimdark magic systems actually, where
Yeah.
it's like to do anything requires that you be horribly immoral. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's so like, as much as I have problems with this book, this core idea of like taking this disgusting, brutal, dark, evil magic and like combining it with modern day science. So you have people walking around a lab in lab coats, but like doing like really like archaic evil things. I think
yeah,
is just a delicious combination. I really like that general concept. I think it's a lot
yeah,
of fun.
yeah. I agree. Yeah, the mixture of the sterility and the witchcraft, basically.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right,
So is
next.
Amoeba Records, that's a real place?
It's funny. It's funny. I've never been to Amoeba Records. I'm not sure about that one, but every like almost every other thing she said, I recognized. I just noticed that one because it was a proper noun, and I was like, she loves to throw in those names of places, especially in the Berkeley part of the book.
She's
Um,
Stephen Kinging it.
yep.
You'll see. You'll see.
All right.
There is an Amoeba Records in Berkeley,
Yeah,
San Francisco, and Hollywood.
I figured. She also mentions like Rasputin and I forget the name of the like a burger place and a pizza place that are popular.
Hmm.
But yeah, anyway, that definitely yeah. All
All
right.
right, let's move on.
So next section, despite Reed and his goons' best efforts, Roger and Dodger's continued bond begins in
That's a
them.
terrible sentence. I'm sorry.
They start to increase in power, and this increase in power results in giant earthquake that levels Berkeley and drives Roger away once again. Roger, she begins, and stops dead as she sees the way he's looking at her, like he's lost, like she's the monster on the other side of the glass, like he never wants to do this again. Did we do this? He repeats. Don't you lie to me, Dodge. I'd know, so don't you lie. She opens her mouth to lie. She stops. She can't do it. She physically can't do it. She wants to. You can see the lie in the space behind her eyes, shimmering and perfect, a gem of prevarication and deceit. She's been practicing her lies for years. She just needs to put the words in the right order, and they'll do the work she has for them. But she can't. Roger has told her not to, and she can't do it. Roger's the first of them to be afraid of what they can do together. Dodger is the first to be afraid of what he can do alone. I think so, she says, and her voice is a whisper. Her voice is a sigh. Her voice is almost swallowed by the murmuring rumble of the dying quake. The shaking has ended. The rolling has gone with it. All that remains is the faintest tremor in the ground, and in a moment, even that will be gone. We, I think we did something when we were playing, and I think it maybe broke some stuff. We started the quake, but we didn't mean to hurt anybody. We couldn't have known. Now we do. He sounds sad, so sad, and she doesn't need quantum entanglement to know what he's thinking. She can see it in his eyes. He steps close again, leans forward, plants a kiss on her forehead, gentle as a farmer planting an apple tree. Then he's gone, stepping away, turning on his heel, and running into the ruins of campus, away from the thing they make when they're together, away from the consequences of what they've done. He's running, and Dodger, for once, is not. She's just staying where she is, eyes open and filling slowly with tears, and watches him go.
Why can't these kids just work it out?
I know. It's too much.
I
My
I,
heart can't handle it.
I love this though.
Yeah.
I love the language here. I love. Sammy's already pointed out. I know you, so don't lie. She opens her mouth to lie. I think
Yeah.
it is fascinating to me that of the two of them, Dodger is the one that is better at lying, the mathematical one, right? Like where at the beginning of the book she talked about how English storytelling is lying, and that's why she hates it. But she is the one that she is so good at lying and has been good at lying her entire life. And I think that's one of those natural, interesting things that happens amongst these characters, like back to that the order sees chaos and chaos sees order type of thing, where she is the cold calculating math one, but is so good at the lying part. She can
Yeah.
see the lies very well.
Yeah, she sees reality exactly as it is, but
Mm-hmm.
also she's the best at articulating how it isn't.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I like that. Sammy points out how good it was, that the Aaron part during the quake, where like she feels it coming, she just calmly takes the cat and goes outside.
Yeah, I liked the two of them during the quake too, when they do the first time they do the thing where she closes her eyes and uses his vision to calculate how to dodge stuff because he has depth perception and she doesn't. I thought that
Yeah.
was really clever.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
567 says, for two people who can communicate telepathically, they're not that good at communicating.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's funny, but it's like the point, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
one of the things they directly draw is this idea that we can talk into each other's heads, but we can't read each other's minds. And
True.
I love that. I love that concept that like, even with this power, even with their brilliance, their reunion, their coming together is foiled by some of the simplest, most obvious things, a lack of communication.
Yeah.
And how often does that happen in families, right? Like I really like this. A lot of what I struggle with this book is kind of getting down to like the overall point, like the theme. Like I don't have a good concept on what this book is trying to say about life and the experience, but the one thing I really grasped onto was just this concept of siblings and this concept of what it's like to be like to be around the brothers and sisters that you have, and that's really the most I got out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's really about family.
Sure.
Yeah, cool.
All right, 6 years have passed, and now Roger is dating Aaron. And at first I was like, "Oh fuck," but it turns out to be okay. But Reed has had success. They've kind of went back to the drawing board and made more children and had success with lab versions. So they've decided that Roger and Dodger aren't necessary anymore and they're going to be scrapped. And Erin reveals herself as her double agent nature and comes clean. And this is a lot of exposition. Right, Roger crosses his arms. Why are you helping me if these are the people who made you? Because they made me like they made you. They made me to be part of a pair, chaos and order. But we weren't as entangled as you and Dodger are. Remember when she slit her wrists and nearly bled out behind her house? I remember you arguing with her in a timeline that never existed about whether that needed to happen, whether that was something the two of you could revise. She said it had to be allowed to remain part of the timeline because that event was one of the things that allowed me to convince you to come with me. Roger's eyes have been getting wider and wider until it seems like they're set to swallow the top half of his face. He folds his arms tighter, holding himself in a half-comforting embrace. You can't live if she dies, and she can't live if you die. That's how it works for the Cuckoos. Every last carefully designed one of you. Me? I can live without my other half just fine. Doesn't mean I want to. Darren had been sullen and quick to anger, rigid in ways that were almost comic coming from an avatar of chaos. He'd wanted everything just so, following patterns he had set and only he could understand. And he'd loved her. Oh, how he'd loved her. They'd been two halves of the same coin, not brother and sister like the incarnations of the Doctrine, but Adam and Eve of the unformed universe, so suited to each other that the thought of being apart had been a painful impossibility. Until the day Reed needed a hammer to pound a stubborn nail, until Aaron needed training, until the Cuckoos needed someone who could watch over their nest while they grew, someone they would be able to accept as a member of their peer group, even though, technically, they had no peers, only each other, only ever each other. Aaron has been here before, over and over, and the timelines looped and changed around her. Darren has never been standing by her side. She suspects that, like Dodger's attempted suicide, his death may be one of the things that can't be changed. Her willingness to betray Reed hinges on it having happened. She hates them for that, Roger and Dodger, who could have each other if they'd stop pushing one another away. She hates them more than she hates anything, and she'll die, again, if that's what it takes for them to stay together. She's done worse. I love this. I love Aaron. I love this reveal. We've been talking about her throughout this with this information assumed, but this is one of the big moments in the book for me where it's like, oh, I get who this. I understand who this character is now. I started cluing into what the book is doing a little bit more. I love her as a, a failed version of like their quest to be together, right? And so
Hmm.
she can never have that, but she's gonna give it to them.
Yeah. Also, I like the element that it's basically the sort of casual cruelty of the villains that is their undoing,
You're
because
right.
their choice to kind of waste her brother is what leads her to be an agent who's willing to help them, and her being willing to help them is crucial to them ever being able to escape.
Yeah, and I really like this idea of those constant things that have to be there, right? Like the suicide, the earthquake, her brother's death. These are things that even with the command of the universe, even with the command of time, there are some things that have to happen in a certain way to make other things happen, and you even they don't have the power to change that stuff. At least
Yeah,
not yet.
right. Same thing happens later with Dodger's parents, where they could just reset it, but they decide like, okay, but if we reset it, that's a big risk, and things could go much worse than they did.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, but
Just a
yeah,
really good part. I love Erin, man. She's one of my favorite. Like I was so surprised because I really hated this character the first time we saw her. Like the cruelty with which she dispatches of people, and like just the idea that she's betraying her friend. And then we see her in a relationship with him. We're like, no shit. Um, but
yeah. I don't know if I fully buy it when she says here that she hates Roger and Dodger. I mean, I think it makes her furious that they get to have each other and she doesn't get to have her brother, because like she's always missing this thing that she's basically meant to have.
yeah, I think
But
I don't think it's like full blown hatred. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, she clearly, like, they're basically friends by the end. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I just love this like who could have each other if they stop pushing one another away, right? Like you were both alive, you were both capable of being together, and it's your choices. The two of you continually choose to walk away from each other, and it's
yeah,
true. Like they are manipulated by the people around them. That is 100% true. But at the end of the day, it is Roger at the beginning that makes the choice. It is Dodger later that makes the choice, and then it is Roger again that makes the choice to separate and cut off. And so, yeah, I mean, I understand that as a frustration. Like your person is right there, your family is there. You have a family still. You have it. It's right there. You just have to be willing to reach out. And I think that's a powerful message just outside of magical alchemy and and
yeah,
the doctrine of ethos. I think it's like talk to your family.
yeah. Right. You have to be willing to fight for that connection and not run
Hmm.
away every time that connection threatens something else in your environment.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. Because family can
Um,
be destructive and cruel and mean in ways that nothing else can because like they're such an intrinsic part of you, right?
yeah.
Um, there's betrayal of your family or hurt or fear of your family is just feel like it stings worse than just about anything because it's like it's my family, yo.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's one thing I like about this is like they're not literally siblings in the normal biological sense. Yeah, I don't actually remember how that all works exactly, but the point being that it does evoke a lot of the feelings of siblinghood, of like you this person you know so well, and then they know you so well that it's like at a pre-conscious level. It's a feeling, right?
Hmm.
It's something that can never really be attained with anyone who you didn't grow up with at that level of closeness.
Yeah, interesting. Tringard says that points out that she thinks about the hate more than once, and they took it as a hint that some version of Roger compelled her allegiance. That's interesting. I hope not. Like I feel like at least this version of Roger and this loop of Roger seems very reticent to use that power unless he absolutely has to. So
Yeah, I do feel like there were some interesting hints at the idea that like down far distant timelines, Roger was more of a tyrant Roger,
sure, sure.
and like they've worked their way through like through vast differences and like many different very different winding paths of how the world went, and like it's not like there are thousands and thousands of very minor variations. Some of these variations were quite extreme. It seems like.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe Roger was more aggressive in some of those timelines. I don't know. I didn't pick that particular thing up, but I did pick up this idea that maybe Roger was a bit different in other timelines.
Yeah. Interesting. Tringard said, who learned that commands to travel in time? Like, Aaron tells that to Roger, but presumably Roger figured that out on his
Somewhere,
own at
yeah.
some point. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think there are definitely versions of Roger that were much more terrible.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So here, Aaron explains the truth of the Up and Under books.
This is the last time we're going to talk about these damn books.
This time, Aaron's sigh is deeply aggravated. Baker since spent some time trying to bring other American alchemists around to her way of thinking. She wanted them to stop warring with each other and guarding their secrets. She thought if they worked together, they'd be able to gain more ground and uncover more of the secrets of the universe. They saw this as a bid for power, since she was, at the time, the only one of them to have harnessed electricity to her whims. They were sexists and traditionalists, and they joined ranks against her. They began poaching or assassinating her students to keep her ways of thinking from gaining too much credence with the masses. In the end, desperate, she began encoding her teachings in fiction, hiding them in plain sight. The Up and Under books are secretly alchemy primers? Asked Dodger. Aaron nods. They were intended to show the enlightened mind the way to expand its reach and grasp. The Oz books are similar. Baum was trying to suppress Baker with his own alchemical wonderland. He succeeded. His readership was wider, but he also failed. Dodger stares at her for a moment before reaching for the handle of the door. Okay, that's it, she says. I'm out. If you'll both excuse me, I need to go explain to my insurance adjusters how my house spontaneously caught fire and why it wasn't arson. James Reed was Baker's final creation and only surviving apprentice. James Reed is, in an alchemical sense, your father. He used his own blood and Asphodel's bones, and the bones of a living woman, and he crafted you to be his tools in the world to come. Dodger stops mid-reach. Reed killed his maker, but not before she finished her masterpiece. All the rules of alchemy, all the trials of the student, the process of purification and reconstitution of the universe into whatever form you choose, she preserved them in her books.
Well, that feels like they'd be really important then, right?
Yeah, and like really detailed, and like we'd want to know those details.
Yeah, and like super key to everything that the book's exploring.
Yeah.
Nope.
Nope.
In fact, Baum's books turn out being more important because that's how they kill Lee. So.
Oh my God, you're right.
There we go.
Yeah. What does that mean on a metaphorical level?
I don't.
The fact that they use the wicked will, like as soon as you see the bucket of solvent, you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
The witch. Yeah.
I wish she had screamed out, "I'm melting."
Yeah, me too. I was disappointed that she didn't scream, "I'm melting."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what a world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more to say about this other than like, thanks for explaining it to us, but you explain it to us in a way that makes it seem like it's very, 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 very important. And yet, I don't feel like it is, because the rest of the book doesn't follow along with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess fundamentally this is a complaint about story economy, because I think both of us would just prefer that this not even be in the story rather than that it be in the story and then be explained more.
Mm-hmm.
Because as it is, it's just like noise. It's just noise. It's like, I don't understand this. It's distracting, and it's not helping me actually understand how they're going to win. So
yeah. I do. While we're here, though, I kind of want to talk about this version of Dodger, because they're in there. I think she's 30 by now, and Dodger is a successful writer. She's written a book on hacking social media, which or something to that extent. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like it was like a how-to social media guide, something. And I think that's a really interesting examination of a character who was super bad at this stuff the entire time, but she eventually like got to the math of the lie, presumably, and got a successful career out of it.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's really interesting.
Right. I mean, it's almost like she couldn't stop worrying at that question of how to interact with people, and she used her brain to figure out a math solution to the problem.
Yeah. Social cues, Tringard says. Yeah.
I like
Cool.
that.
That's interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was an interesting surprise that she turned out to be a writer. At first, I was like, oh, I thought Dodger was the writer,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, well, she's super competent at whatever. She could definitely write a nonfiction book. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably ghostwritten anyway. These
Yeah,
math
probably.
people. Right.
Yeah. I mean, tell me about it.
All right. So this is the moment they are in the bath. So okay, I didn't put this in a thing, but I want to talk to you about this because there's this recurring moment in the story where they're like, we got to figure out which alchemical quadrant we're in so we know how to get to the center. And I was just like, what the fuck are you talking about, book? What is going on? Like, what are you talking about? Is that just me? Like, I didn't get where this was coming from.
I mean, so honestly, I just kind of, this is what my brain did. My brain said, okay, what's happening here is that she's just using her super math powers to tap into like the true secret rules of alchemy, which she can do because she can see the true secret rules of whatever, because that's that's more closely what her power is fundamentally.
Sure.
And then I just tuned out what she was saying.
Yeah, there's suddenly like the world is divided into 4 quadrants, and we must find out which quadrant we're in. So then we know which direction to get to the center of the quadrant, and we need to be at the center of the quadrant to manifest. And I'm so glad everyone in chat is agreeing with me on this, because I was just like, what? Yeah, I did not like that part. It was very frustrating to me.
I mean, I think I literally did tune it out when it was in the audiobook part. I was just like, I can't process that. That's not anything.
I like the part where they made the ruins of the baths appear, even though it didn't exist anymore. That was cool.
Yeah, that was another element where I was like, yeah, she definitely lived in San Francisco. Like, not that I know what the baths are or anything about them, but that's one of those little pieces of historical trivia. Like, oh yeah, there used to be these baths here and they burned down.
Cool. I didn't know that was real.
Oh, I don't actually know that it's real. I just assumed that it was. Let me look it up.
Wow.
What are they called? San Francisco.
I don't know. Baths. Just say water alchemy baths.
Sutro baths. Yes, it's real.
Okay.
There's a picture.
It makes sense that it's real. She's made everything else real.
Yeah, it's what's called in modern time a swimming pool. No, it's much bigger than a swimming pool. Actually, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Sammy says, "I just thought I was dumb." You weren't dumb, Sammy. It didn't make any sense. It's just, I think the problem, to really drill down to the problem, is it is now throwing concepts at us that it have not existed in the book before, and just expecting us to roll with them. And it's like it's basically like the third act is basically like this long extended chase, and it never made sense to me why they needed to be a certain place to manifest. Like, wasn't the whole point that we needed to keep them apart, because if they're together for too long, it's just gonna happen? But now suddenly there has to be like a place to complete the ritual, and I didn't feel like that was sufficiently set up. And then it does this weird thing where like that's the climax is at this place, but then we go back to the lab after that.
I did not like the way it ended, and it went back. I was just like, that was clearly the climax. We do not need to go back to the lab. Yeah. Josh says, despite really liking the book overall, they do think that it would have been a better book if it were just 2 very gifted children with linked minds and no weird out of place alchemy.
I agree.
I agree so much. I think the problem is that then you're like, okay, but what's the plot? And I think that I almost would suspect that she had the idea to have 2 very gifted siblings with magically linked minds, and then was like, all right, how do I make a plot superstructure around this concept? And then had to think of a justification for the superpowers, and then invented this whole alchemy thing around it. And that's because it does feel like the kernel of a great concept with a kind of a cruddy explanation.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think it could have maybe worked if you cut out the cuts to Reed and them. I think if you just start You can even start with the end and do like the chapter 7 thing or the book 7 thing, and then cut back. I like that, but just cut out all the part where we're like having these alchemists explain what's going on. Just center it on our kids, make the kids the point of view characters, and stick with them throughout it, and just have this stuff like have them like be forced to confront this stuff. I think it would have worked a lot better than giving us the reader a window into this before in a kind of like dramatic irony kind of way. Yeah. Just 2 points of view. Yeah, exactly. Trengard. Yeah. So anyway, let's show them manifest here. That was a very get this over with tone, but I like this passage. It's too late for a reset now. She couldn't hear him if he called. It's too late to go back and try again. For the first time, their story's ending. And their names were Roger and Dodger, because they were named by people who should never have been allowed anywhere near children, he describes, and squeezed her to his chest, like he would give her half of his own heartbeat, fill her veins with his own blood. They grew up sort of weird and sort of wonderful, and they found each other and lost each other over and over again. But this time, when they found each other, they came as close as they could to the impossible city. They walked the length of the improbable road, and the girl wrote down everything she knew about the universe, and the boy read it all aloud, and everything was okay. Everything was fine. They got to be together. He stops, looking down at Dodger expectantly. She doesn't move. Dodge, come on. I read your math. She doesn't move. Come on. He shakes her, and she still doesn't move. Desperate, he looks back at the wall, searching for something, anything he might have left out, that he might have missed. There's a thumbprint next to the final figure. It could, under the right circumstances, be interpreted as an asterisk. She must have left it before she fell. So he reaches for her hand and takes it firmly in his and reads the ending. And they both lived. Dodger opens her eyes. I don't know, man. I don't like this ending, but I love this. I love that. Like, I love that they are kind of symbiotic, and like he can do a lot of stuff, but he's not creating here. He's reading. He's making language out of the math, just like she would make math out of the language at times. So like he needs her part to do his, like the whole time in the book we were talking about how like her power, for her to really unleash her power, it requires a command from him. And this is, to me, kind of the counter of that. For him to fully release his power in a full extent, it needs the math from her. Like, I don't think he could have just said, and they both lived, if that asterisk hadn't been there.
Yeah.
But it was, so he could.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I wonder if you thought that Dodger was going to die, because I thought Dodger was going to die.
Yeah, I did. I mean, she did.
She did, but I thought she was gonna.
And then he made it not happen.
But I thought she was gonna be actually dead. Like I thought it was kind of setting up to a tragedy. And I'm glad she didn't. This isn't one of those cases where I was like, I felt like it was a cop out or something.
Sure.
I guess it's actually a good, it's good writing when you believe that that a character can actually die, and I was actually kind of like at peace with it before he revives her using his magic. So
I mean, what would they have done like if she died? Because then he would die, right? Would they just say, "Oh, just kidding, he's not dead"?
I mean, it could have been like once the manifestation is complete, she mind melds into him, and now they're one entity and they're not separate anymore, and they transcend and turn into a glowing golden sphere. I don't know. I was pretty. I would have been pretty open to a variety of endings, since it was like the whole premise is like the doctrine is realizing itself and reintegrating that can take all kinds of forms. Like I really did think she was going to die and then she was going to like enter into him or something like that. But
yeah, that's fair. I wouldn't have liked that, but I didn't love this ending. So
yeah.
Remember when Lee dies, and then later in the book they're like, "Ha! You didn't look for the corpse." And I'm just like, oh, okay. That feels kind of lame.
Right. Yeah. Right. I was absolutely not. I was just like, oh, her again?
Oh, she's still alive. Well,
we defeated this already.
Yeah. I mean, just have her escape Don't like fake us out. There's no
right?
reason to do a fake out at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's the trope of like you've already won, and then the monster lunges out of the wreckage
Yeah,
one last time before being
right.
shot, and then the hero says the one-liner. That's this in book
It
form.
says not in my movie,
Yeah.
which I never understood that Scream, because in Scream it says this is the part in the scary movie where the killer leaps up for one final scare, and then the killer leaps up for one final scare, and Nev Campbell shoots him in the head, and she says, "Not in my movie." But yeah, it happened. He just did it. That happened, Nev.
Yeah, I mean, she's wrong.
I got you, Scream.
Yeah.
I love that movie. That just
Brutal.
always bothered me. I don't know why I'm talking about this. It's because this book is not interesting to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry I
right.
picked this.
I mean, there was a lot of good stuff in there. Honestly,
Sure.
I got some cool ideas for things that I was inspired by for some writing things.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't hate it. It's funny. Tringard says like exactly the right thing. Like I loved from the 1/3 point through the 90% point. It's like yes, that's exactly it. Yes,
I agree. And yeah, we're being more negative than we normally are, but there is a lot to like about this. I agree with you. I'm being too negative.
I don't know. I I didn't love this book. I love some things about this book.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
all right, final slide. After manifesting, the three confront and defeat Lee and Reed in a boring fight scene. They finally realize how often they've been resetting time. Who's talking here? The astrolabe began showing errors the day we were born, running in reverse, stopping, backing up, leaping from one time to another. It's the resets. Some of these columns are describing the ones who didn't manifest, but I know these dates. She taps a column. This is where we made contact. See, the last time of the day, that's when I gave up. Sorry, the last time on that day, that's when I gave up, or when you told me not to. It's all through our lives, all these little corrections, all the time we went back and started again. But I can't reset without you, and you didn't know to tell me to reset when I was 5. 5 years old, and she runs into the street where a truck hits her, putting her in a coma that will last for 25 years until a man she never got to meet is brought to her bedside by a scowling woman with strawberry blonde hair, until the man gives her an order at the woman's cold command. 5 years old, and she lived to be 30, and she never lived at all. She doesn't fully understand. She can see that and be frustrated by it, even as she forgives him. Sometimes she won't understand him either. That's why they have to stay together. They have to explain the universe for one another. Every time we reach the baths or whatever else we could use to call the impossible city into being, and we've tried again, she says. Maybe sometimes we've tried again from some place that looks a lot like this, but it almost never happens until now, until we're almost 30 years old. But Roger, the stars haven't moved. Erin said the doctrine was a universal force. She meant it. We've been resetting the entire universe, because otherwise the stars would have jumped 30 years out of place every time we reset time, he says with dawning horror. Does he say how many times, how many errors he recorded? This last time was lucky number 13. That's not so bad. 1,000. Almost 500,000 years of looping the universe through their lifetimes, of using their own needs as a lever on which to turn everything that is or has ever been. Roger stares at her. For the first time he can remember, words have no meaning. The numbers they describe are too big. The offense they contain is too much. Finally, in a choked voice, he says, "Yeah, let's not fuck with time anymore until we're sure we're doing it for the last time."
I liked this reveal. I liked the Astrolab as kind of a representation. Like from the very beginning, it was set up as a representation of their time resets, and we get to see the reveal that it was 500,000 years was shocking. Like it really was.
Yeah.
I think that was a really good. I think it earned that kind of twist. Not really a twist, but it earned the shock of that moment.
I'm confused about how the astrolabe works, but I'm gonna let that slide because it doesn't really matter.
It was created so expertly that it depicts, it's accurately models the entire universe, and because they were moving the universe, it moved.
But no one. But it shouldn't you shouldn't notice that though. It should
No,
just be back where it was.
no, because it goes in reverse. Wait, what? Yeah, you're right. Wait. Because they're going in reverse too.
They're going into it's part of the universe. I mean, I get it. It's magic. Fine, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm right, but it doesn't matter.
Does that mean Reed was aware that he's been alive for 500,000 years? I guess it has to, right?
Man, I sure wish I knew the answer to the questions like that one that you just asked, and similar. Jesus. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you're right, Josh. It was mentioned early on that it was placed outside of time. But, like, how, though?
They're probably baby fat or something.
Yeah, it was baby fat. It is just, they poured baby fat all over it, and that makes it not exist in time anymore.
Yeah, I like this. There's just this one parenthetical that's describing the alternate timeline where she's put into a coma for 25 years.
Yeah.
And you just get like that's enough. That followed by 500,000 years of looping is enough to be like, oh, there must have been just some really wild timelines in there. So
yeah, and 567 is kind of pointing out that like what's the theme, like what's the takeaway from what they've been doing, like, and I sat with this for a while today because I was right with you where I was like, all right, so what is the main idea here? And I was like looking at this idea of bending the universe around yourself, right? This idea of two people, and I tried to mold this idea of growing up and like coming into an understanding of who you are and your abilities as not like an extra dimensional god being, but as just like a human being. But like growing up is learning who you are and learning what you're capable of, and this idea of eventually you have to learn that like you are not the center of the universe and you need to stop warping everything around you. And that's the best I can do, Matt. And I don't even like that. Like I just said that and there's like I thought of 20 holes in what I just said.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you could say is the idea of as you grow up, there are sometimes things where you're like, oh, I regret that. I wish I could change that. And the fact is, if you could change that, you wouldn't be you wouldn't have learned that particular lesson.
Yeah.
And the process of growing up to adulthood is understanding and coming to peace with the idea that certain terrible things had to have happened to put you where you are. And even if they were objectively terrible, you still have to admit that where you are now is benefited by that having happened or something along those lines.
But I mean, that's kind of cheating, right? Like they reset the timeline 13,000 times. And they're like, yeah, well, we learned that these 4 events were necessary, but all the other horrible things that happened to me, I fucking dealt with them. Well, so I don't know.
I mean, we all get to reset the timeline arbitrarily.
What?
And then you just keep the future that's the one you prefer. So that's what this story is about.
Matt?
Anyway.
Matt?
Moving on.
Do you have powers?
No more than everyone else does, Scott.
David says the theme is call your sibling. I agree. Call your sibling.
Yeah.
All right, here's the end of the book. See them now. They walk through the corn, a cluster of 4 moving 2 by 2, brothers holding fast to sisters, sisters keeping their brothers close. They are not a family, not yet, but they will be. The inevitability of it is written on the 2 similar lines of their faces, in the way they share certain small mannerisms, certain subtle ways of holding themselves. They come from the same place. They share experiences that no one will ever understand, nor should be asked to. And they are beautiful. There's nothing arrogant or cruel to their beauty. It is a fact of existence, as plain as the noses on their faces or the smears of mercury and gold paint still showing on the skins of the 2 of them. They've traveled through the up and under, perhaps the last to make such a pilgrimage, and the things they've learned from this journey will be with them always. For better or for worse, there is no going back to where they started. Not for any of them. California, says Dodger. And California, Roger agrees. And anywhere but here, says Kim, in a voice like a sigh. Tim says nothing. Tim simply looks around with eyes like saucers drinking in the world. But this is not the entire ending. Look. In a room beneath the earth, in a place where nothing good endures, a woman left for dead, a woman whose pulse has fallen so far below the threshold needed for saving, stirs. She opens her eyes. She is weak, wrung almost to the point of breaking. But she is alive. All she sees is chaos. That isn't unusual. Erin has always seen chaos everywhere she looks. But this chaos is almost soothing, because this chaos means it's over. This chaos means it's done. Most of all, this chaos means this time they're letting things roll onward. For better or worse, they found a timeline they're willing to preserve for a while, and they're willing to let her rest. The idea is almost intoxicating. Rest. What a glorious, impossible goal that seems. Rest. I love the ending for Erin. As much as I don't like the ending, or I have trouble with the ending, I really like this idea that, like, they saved Erin or stopped torturing her through this, like, constant, the constant force of existence where she just gets to die and not have to relive all this horror over and over and over again.
Yeah. Interesting. Now that you say that, I do think she dies, but I think when I read it, I thought that she, like, pretended to die and then waited for them to leave so they wouldn't hassle her, but that's kind of stupid. She
had just passed out.
Yeah, I think she was just like, oh, good, they're just gonna let me die. That's much preferable to having to go back to being 5 years old again. Yeah. That's, which is kind of sad, but yeah, that's a really good ending. I don't know if I'm stupid or if the ending wasn't clear, but I really didn't get that she was dead until you said that, and then I was like, oh yeah, obviously she's dead.
Well, so, she lights the whole building on fire and stays laying down. So
I don't know, man.
She did.
I don't know, man. This magic, though. You know, anything can happen.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, reading over the beginning part of this after having talked about the importance of family, I think it really sells that idea, right? They share experience that no one else will ever understand, nor should be asked to. Like, this idea that, like, your family is, and your relationship with your family is something truly unique, right? It is not like anything else in the world. It is not like, even other siblings can't quite understand the relationship between you and your siblings, right? So, I don't know. I think that's a kind of a beautiful thing to leave with, and I wish that had kind of been more of a focus instead of just kind of wrapped around to that. And I know it kind of is, like, and again, I think really getting back to just these two characters, focus on this point of view and don't show us anyone else, would really sell this more.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. I mean, I literally think the book would be improved by cutting out all that stuff. We've said it a few times. And 5, 6, 7 and Sammy both agree. We didn't see the body, Scott. She's not dead.
She's dead. She literally...
Oh, okay. She's dead. I agree.
She's dead.
Yeah.
All right. So anything we didn't talk about that you guys really felt like we should have talked about? You know, I was supposed to say this at the beginning and I forgot. The reason I picked this book, on top of the fact that I heard very good things about this author, was it seemed like this was a story about storytelling. And you know how I am with books about storytelling, Matt. I really like them. And it's really, I mean, it definitely has that element in it, but it's really not. And that was one of my bigger disappointments with it.
Yeah, right. I in fact, when we got to the element of, like, first of all, the math versus language and storytelling tropes being a way of basically the way the magic system worked, which again is reminiscent of Pact, but not really the same way.
Sure.
I thought that was why you picked this book, actually. So, but yeah, I agree that it doesn't end up working on the levels that you and I find titillating.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of there. Yeah.
But that being said, I think I would be willing to try some other books from this author. So people in the chat are talking about how this was a little bit experimental. In the afterword, she says that, and her publisher wasn't sure if it would work, but her brother told her to go for it, which explains the family stuff, says Eric. So I liked the prose enough, and I liked the drawing of some of the characters enough that I kind of want to read some more stuff by this author. I'm not going to prioritize her books in a way that, like, if I like when I read that first Sanderson book, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna read all these Sanderson books. But I do want to try some other stuff.
Yeah, I think that she impressed me with her prose. She
Yeah.
impressed me with a lot of her character work. I think the places that she didn't impress me were in plot and in inability to cut out things that were boring, and maybe she gets better at that,
Sure.
or maybe you can just literally write it off and just be like, look, she understood that this was experimental. Can mean a lot of things, obviously, but you could take it to just mean that she was trying something that she wasn't sure if it would work in terms of the plot, and then it didn't work, and then she was like, well, I learned something, which I really don't hold that against writers, actually, to try things that they don't necessarily know will work.
Oh yeah, we've been very critical of this book. I like just write your stuff, you know. Like I never want to make it seem like my criticism is being like, oh, you shouldn't have even tried this. This was a bad idea.
Right. No, this isn't that bad.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I think we had some negative things to say, and we might have harped on them too much, but there's tons to love in this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if their character is as good as Roger and Dodger in her other books, then I would like to read at least try one of them out. Yeah. For sure.
David asks if we would recommend this book to people. Man, I don't know. I would. I'm going to answer yes, but it would be like I couldn't just be like, hey, read this book. It would be like, hey, read this book if you want to explore some specific things, and please be okay with other things.
Yeah, really good characters. Not the best plot in the world. I might go so far as to say that. But yeah, I agree with giving kind of a caveated recommendation.
Yeah. I mean, she's won lots of awards. She's a Hugo Award winner, multiple Hugo Award winner. So, did this book win a Hugo? I don't actually know.
Probably not.
Yikes.
I mean, David says they didn't read it, so they appreciate our recommendation at this point.
Oh, well, there we go. It did not. Her Hugo winners are. Okay. SF Squeecast? What is that? Oh, that's a fan cast. That's not. That's okay. I'm gonna hold on. You can win a Hugo for a fan cast?
Interesting.
Why aren't we winning Hugos?
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of our boy Brandon, let's talk about next month.
Let's do it.
So next month we are going to finish the Mistborn trilogy with the final book in the series, The Hero of Ages. We put this one on the poll thinking it would win, and it did, but it was very close, Matt. It was very close. Perdido Street Station was a very close second, so that's definitely going to be on the poll in the coming months, and we'll probably get around to that eventually.
Yeah, we'll get there, but I'm happy to be reading this one. I mean, we love the first two, so
yeah, I am very excited to see the end of this. One thing we do need to say, though, is we will be meeting on Friday, November 22nd, because the last Friday of November is the 29th, which is the day after Thanksgiving in America, and I don't think Matt and I really want to do a book club the day after Thanksgiving, and I think a lot of you guys probably, if you live in the States, you probably don't want to either, so we're going to do it the Friday before, because this podcast was such a early one. We still have a full 4 weeks to read this book, so it's not any shorter time because we're moving in a week early. So it all works out. So Friday, November 22nd at 9:30 Central Time is when we will be discussing this book. I am very, very excited. And as 567 says, is the first time we'll be finishing a series on the book club. We're over 2 years into the book club now. We're finally finishing a series.
Yeah,
and we've got some more to do as well. I think we're going to get around to finishing the Gentleman Bastards eventually.
hope so.
Yeah. The Expanse, that would take a year on its own.
True.
There's 9 books in that series. I would love to do one on Wise Man's Fear. eventually. That's just a big book, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I would love to do that. That's a great book. I love that book.
Yeah.
So.
All right, guys. Well, that is it for us this month. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in live. I know we were very critical of this book, but I think my feeling on this book was greatly enhanced by all y'all's feeling, because there were I told Matt before we started, there were literal moments where I thought I was going crazy because I just was like, am I just reading bad? Like I don't understand. And so it really helped me to see all you guys have similar opinions. That really helps me get my head around this book. So those of you that came and talked with us, thank you. For those listening on the podcast, come talk about Hero of Ages with us next month. It's a lot of fun. I think everyone in the chat here will agree that it is a good time. I hope.
Yeah, it was a very, very active chat today. That was really exciting, and I did my best to kind of try to keep up. I mean, I read everything. I just didn't necessarily respond to everything.
Sure.
But yeah, thanks for showing up. So yeah, if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. And if you do that, you'll get access to our private Discord server, and of course, also the ability to vote for which books we cover on these book club episodes, and tons of other cool benefits.
That's right. And if you have any questions or comments, of course, or just want to let us know what you think about the book club or any of the books we've ever talked about, you can always find us on Twitter at doofmedia or email us at doofmedia@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, doofmedia.com/calendar. If you're ever curious about when the book club is, we got our full calendar up on the website. You can check out and see when all of our shows come out and when the book club is. So if you ever forget, doofmedia.com/calendar. It's right there. All right, guys, we will see you all next month for some Mistborns coin shots. It's been too long. I forgot all the other terms.
Smoker.
Yeah. Tin eye.
Strong hands.
That's not it.
Tough guy. Right. Stopping.
Yeah. Graphic audio version of Mistborn.
I did not. I don't even know what that is. I listened to. I like whatever version I listened to. It definitely wasn't a full cast deal. It was just a one man reading a book the way God intended.
Yes, that was one of God's decrees.
No, see, I had
the 11th commandment.
Yeah.
Full cast audiobooks forbidden.
Every time I hear full cast, I now just think about the Dune audiobook, which was like half full cast, but half not full cast, which just was very distracting to me.
Yeah, 42 hours long. It's a very, very big book, and I liked it so much, and I have a lot to say about it. But I think the reason we haven't put Wise Men's Fear back on the thing is I still kind of want to do a whole show about those books, because I think there's a lot to say about them. Maybe we'll wait until the third book comes out, and then one day we'll put that on the show schedule. To do
you know what, Scott? I agree. Let's commit to that.
Okay, done.
When the third book comes out.
Done. And then we're also going to do a full Song of Ice and Fire show when that series is done.
Yeah, chapter by chapter read through. We're so cruel. Such mean people.
It's okay. They can finish the books whenever they want. I don't care. I mean, I do care. I've had caring beaten out of me by years of nothing.
So. Yeah. I've cared so much that I can no longer care. I can no longer afford to care.
Indeed. Full sound effects and music. Cool. All right, guys. I think we're going to take off. I need to go check on my sick puppy dog. Make sure she's not dead. So I'm going to go do that. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. As always, it was a lot of fun. We really, really enjoy these things. And we hope you do too. So get the Hero of Ages. We'll make the official announcement probably early next week on like where I do the post and the link to buy it on Amazon and all that. But hope to see you guys next month.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye-bye.